Thanks very much, Tommy, and great to be with you all today, and great to see so many here, and great to see the sun shining outside at long last as well, and getting a bit of an Indian summer. I hope it will last for a little period of time. So listen, thanks. I appreciate the invitation, Tommy, and it's a pleasure to be with you all to discuss a topic of paramount importance, not only to Ireland but globally, that being the science of sustainable food systems. And I want to commend Tommy, as your President, for choosing this theme. Societies worldwide are grappling with the challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, resource depletion and malnutrition, both starvation and obesity, all against a rising global population and an accompanying 50% rise in food demand. The challenges in reconciling these issues and producing food more sustainably and equitably were core to the development of our Food Vision 2030 strategy. Given the ever greater emphasis placed on sustainable food systems since the launch of the strategy in 2021, we are fortunate that the committee had the foresight to ground the strategy in a food systems approach, recognising the interconnectedness between policies for food, environment and for health. And to start with, I want to address the challenge. The global food system has to contend with geopolitical tensions, animal and plant diseases, weather events and price volatility. Farmers and processors are obviously the most affected. But we have also witnessed how they impact consumers, with recent estimates from the OECD showing that for every 10% increase there is in fertiliser prices, there is a 2% increase in food costs. Food inflation has reminded us of the global nature of the food system and how sensitive it is to input price changes, trade shocks, climate events and other similar factors. So how do we meet the food needs of the planet? I believe the answer lies in having an arsenal of technological innovations at our disposal. Science is guiding us towards solutions that strike a balance between feeding the planet and preserving its ecosystems. We know from experience that this is a realistic ambition, as since 1960 we have increased agricultural production per person by more than 45%. In terms of solutions to this challenge, I want to first point to the role of science and innovation and government support in this area. In Ireland, we are fortunate to have a strong international reputation for scientific excellence and agricultural innovation. The Government's commitment to supporting research is reflected in our substantial investment in institutions, infrastructure, projects and people. Research and innovation are at the heart of our Food Vision 2030 strategy, and I'm proud to say that agriculture, food and forestry research is the fourth largest sectoral area for public research investment in the country. My department has committed over €245 million since 2010 for public good research across these areas, second only to Germany within the EU. We continue to build on this investment by committing funding to new international initiatives that bring about collaboration between our researchers with those in institutes across Europe, the United States and New Zealand. To foster the best approach to the science of sustainable food systems, it is necessary to also build partnerships between public and private sector experts, such as we are doing in our collaboration with Climate KIC. This initiative encourages a transdisciplinary approach, progressing from a scientific agenda focused on individual components of agriculture or food to one that makes clear links between ag, food and the environment. When we examine our own national food system, perhaps the greatest challenge we are faced with is that of climate mitigation. Rising emissions are not compatible with the Paris Agreement, and every country must contribute. We can't stand back just because some other countries aren't, as our grandchildren wouldn't thank us. But despite all the negativity and criticism, we actually have reason to be confident that we can reduce our emissions profile. In the recently published Teagasc Marginal Abatement Cost Curve, approximately 60% of the measures are cost negative or cost neutral and can be implemented now. Reducing age of slaughter, reducing fertiliser use, changing fertiliser type, adopting clover and multi-species swards, tapping into the potential of genetics and breeding indices. These are all tools which have been proven through publicly funded research. We know we need very high adoption rates, and this will require a major concerted and urgent effort. You all have a role to play in this. Organisations such as the Agricultural Science Association can lead. My own department will continue to provide the necessary supports. And if we unleash the potential of these MAC measures on a national scale, we will put ourselves well on the path to reaching our sectoral targets. And I know that this is an ambition that everyone in this room shares. Our commitment to developing further climate mitigation solutions is exemplified by our investment in this research area and our involvement in a range of international initiatives, such as the Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate and the Global Research Alliance for Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. I was pleased to appoint your President, Tommy Boland, to co-chair a livestock research group of the latter recently. In view of the scale and breadth of activities taking place, I'm delighted to announce here today that my department will host a major national conference on agriculture and climate change, Science into Action, at the Aviva Stadium on Wednesday, the 15th of November. Besides examining where we are in terms of climate policy, this conference will have a very strong focus on the state of science as it relates to methane, nitrous oxide and soil carbon, and will serve to bring all stakeholders up to speed on the very important publicly funded research taking place on these areas. I will announce more details in the coming weeks. Science has demonstrated that a shift from conventional farming practices is possible. Precision agriculture, data analytics, satellite imagery and sensor technologies are key. Our commitment to supporting research and innovation in this space will contribute to ensuring that Irish farmers remain at the forefront of sustainable practices. The current rollout of the AgNav data platform is a good example of this in action. By leveraging the most robust interagency data, research and resources, farmers can access the baseline greenhouse gas and ammonia emission figures for their farms. This then allows for the identification of the most appropriate tailored actions to reduce those emissions. In parallel, innovations such as new genomic techniques are also being examined. I welcome the attention that the Spanish presidency of the EU is currently placing on this issue, following the publication of the Commission's proposal for a regulation on plants obtained by certain NGTs. This technology can open up important opportunities for the rapid development of crops with improved traits which can deliver benefit to farmers, consumers and the environment. I opened a public consultation on NGTs earlier this week, and I would encourage you to make submissions prior to the closing date of September the 25th. The science of sustainable food systems is not limited to production methods. It also encompasses food distribution, access and affordability. Agriculture and food trade are a critical element of sustainable food systems and are clearly an imperative for the Irish agri-food sector, which is globally oriented. In 2022, our exports to over 180 markets worldwide reached a record €19 billion, a phenomenal rise of 88% from the €10.2 billion recorded 10 years earlier. Given the global nature of food systems, this is something we can be very proud of. Food trade and food sovereignty are complementary parts of food security. At a global level, it has been shown that agricultural trade openness has on average a positive net impact on food security and dietary diversity. But it also has to be fair and balanced. That is why I've offered qualified support to EU-negotiated free trade agreements which serve both our offensive and defensive efforts and interests, while also ensuring there is a level playing field in relation to environmental sustainability. Policies such as the European Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism will be important in reducing the risk of carbon leakage, for example. It is important to highlight that this transition to more sustainable food systems is challenging. To the fore of farmers' minds this week is how our water quality challenge and the resultant changes to the nitrate derogation next January will impact their farms. For water quality, climate and biodiversity, there are no silver bullets, and change will need the appropriate policy reforms, incentives and investment, regulation, innovation, time and space. The importance of working collaboratively can't be overstated. All of you in this room, whether from the public or private sector, representative groups such as the Agricultural Science Association, NGOs, the media, you all have a role to play in this transition. Whether it be in driving the uptake of these technologies, building trust, changing mindsets, protecting and enhancing social licence, but also in engaging in informed, respectful dialogue. You bring expertise and experience to debates that will ensure that stakeholders and citizens have access to evidence-based information. In conclusion, the science of sustainable food systems presents us with an opportunity to reshape the way we produce, distribute and consume food. While there are unprecedented challenges, there are also unprecedented opportunities. By harnessing the power of innovation, technology and knowledge, we can create a future where food security is ensured, ecosystems are preserved, and the well-being of current and future generations is safeguarded. As Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, I am committed to fostering an environment where science-driven solutions thrive, propelling us towards a more sustainable and prosperous future. Before I finish, I want to again acknowledge and thank Tommy for his presidency of the ASA this year, and take this opportunity to wish Niamh Bambrick the very best for her term as incoming President. I wish you a productive and enjoyable presidency, Niamh, and I look forward to engaging with you further during your tenure, as I did with Tommy. Goromila Mayogaf Goler, and thank you again for the invitation to be with you all here today. Goromila.
Thank you, Minister. I know you have a pressing agenda this afternoon. I have a countdown clock here in front of me because we need to flip this table for dinner tonight for everybody, but we do have time for a couple of questions. Minister, you made reference to global trade in food, and Irish food products are recognised internationally for both their quality and their sustainability merits. And the farming community, the agri-food sector, is facing a number of challenges around greenhouse gas emissions, water quality, biodiversity. In meeting these demands from an environmental perspective, what can you and your department do to ensure that we're not reducing food production to deliver on these sustainability measures?
Yeah, so I think this is the real challenge, Tommy, and it's the one I think we can all meet. But it is to actually maintain and increase food production in the time ahead, while minimising and reducing the emissions footprint of how we produce that food, and also of addressing what we have all seen to be the real challenges that have emerged in terms of the environment and in terms of the health and strength of biodiversity over the last generation. And the first step in all of that is to try and work together and collaboratively, as I said in my remarks. And I think we do that really, really strongly within the country. And I see it as my role as Minister and as the role of the Department to continue to lead out in that. So we're quite unique, for example, when you look around the world in relation to our collaborative approach to putting in place plans in terms of how we bring the sector forward, Food Vision 2030 being the most recent example. And that sets out the pathway for the next decade, a pathway which is designed to continue being productive in relation to food production, but to reduce the emissions footprint in relation to it. And then, in terms of implementing that, the key objective for myself as Minister then is to back that up in terms of consistent policy and consistent measures and consistent investment, which actually brings that forward. So the new Common Agricultural Policy, for example, and the commitment of the Government by increasing the national co-funding of the Common Agricultural Policy by 50% from the last cap to this cap is a crucial underpinning of that for the next number of years up in 2027. It's the highest increase we've ever had between CAP programmes, and in terms of the structure and design of that CAP programme, then whether it be the acre scheme, whether it be the multi-species sward scheme, for example, red clover silage, or the recent liming programme, or national soil sampling, as well as the investment in the beef sector and the sheep sector in a way that's going to make it more efficient, we need to back that up. But I think that encapsulates really our shared challenge, continuing to be really productive from a food point of view, but to lower the emissions footprint of it.
Yeah. I'll go to the floor in a moment. The lights up here don't make it very easy for me to see. Niamh Bambrick has a roving mic, so if you raise your hand if you have a question, state your name and your affiliation. Minister, maybe to pick up on that question a wee bit then, we're all working together for this goal, but it's the farmers themselves on the ground who will have to adopt the practice change. So, what needs to be done to support farmers in that regard?
I think working together is the key along the way, and setting in place plans which have farmers very much at the centre of it, and which back family farms in relation to the work that they do. So I think the various schemes we have in the CAP programme are central to that. Then, I mean, the approach we're taking as well in terms of engaging with farmers right along the way in relation to the challenges that they're facing, and also continuing to provide that information and education which farmers have a great thirst for. So, I mean, Teagasc do tremendous work through their signpost farms, and we back them very strongly in relation to that. Many of the research and education institutions who are here today are doing massive work in relation to that. Many of the private companies who are represented here today are doing really, really valuable work in relation to it as well. And listen, it is a time of a lot of change. It leads to uncertainty, etc. as well, in terms of what the future might hold. But the best way we can address that is actually try and plan ahead and work together in terms of how we implement it. That's critical, I think.
Okay, have we a question on the floor, Niamh? Yeah, here in the front.
Karina Pierce from UCD. Thanks, Minister. The dairy sector has proven itself to be a vibrant and profitable sector, but there's huge negativity out there currently, raising questions around the future prospects of the industry. And you mentioned supports, but maybe you could be more specific about supports, or those even in the shorter term, to help the industry and farmers in particular address challenges. The nitrates is obviously the one that's most pertinent today, but it's not the only challenge that's there.
Yeah, well, I suppose, listen, I mean, the key platform which underlines and anchors the next 4 or 5 years is the Common Agricultural Policy. And we took a lot of time and attention to actually frame that in a way that was consistent with Food Vision 2030, that supplemented and accelerated the implementation and the progress that we want to see and achieve within that. And certainly, listen, we've seen challenges this week in relation to the nitrates derogation and the change from 250 to 220 in relation to that. That's something I've been working with the farm representative organisations on from over the course of this year, given the challenge that we knew we had from the point where the derogation was negotiated in March of last year, whereby there was a very real prospect that we could be dropping from 250 to 220 maximum per hectare from this January. So we worked together, and I put together, for example, in relation to that, the water quality implementation group to work in terms of actually putting us in a strong position to continue with that derogation post-2025, but also to work to see if there was any possibility that we could actually get additional flexibility and an amendment to that derogation that would see us stay at the 250. I suppose a lot of the coverage in the last few days relates to the fact that I stepped that forward, met with the European Commissioner, and they very clearly indicated to us that given the fact that it is their view and perspective that the derogation that we have, and we just negotiated 18 months ago, is the most flexible one of any country in Europe, and that we've only recently negotiated, that it's simply not feasible to go back and ask other member states to once again vote to give us further flexibility in what is seen to be the most flexible derogation and most that any European member state has. So listen, I've been working with the sector to look to see how we could address that. I'm going to continue to work now to see how we can address the fact that it's clear that there won't be any change to the fact that it will be dropping to the 220. I think our objective has to be to make sure that we hold that derogation and we hold that 220. We see the pressure that's emerged over the course of this year as a result of the prospect of the drop to 220. And if it was to drop any further, that pressure would become even more acute and undermine the really important system that we have here and the importance of that derogation too. So, but bottom line is, to achieve that, for example, we all have to work collaboratively to improve water quality and to see it improve, so that we put ourselves in a position to maintain that derogation and to have other member states continue to vote for us to have it. And farmers are doing a hell of a lot in relation to steps and implementing and continuing to adopt practices at farm level designed to improve water quality, and that's something we have to continue to do and put ourselves in a strong position in relation to it. And listen, in relation to uncertainty then, Karina, around that, all we can do from a regulatory point of view is provide as much clarity and forward picture as possible in relation to what regulation and policy is going to be. That's been our objective, and then to work with farmers to adjust to that and make the absolute most of the policy environment in which we have to work. And listen, from a nitrates point of view, obviously we work within the European Union. We work within a common food safety standards and common environmental standards, which we as food producers have to work to here, and which are massively important to us, because we, more than any country, benefit from the European Union as a market, as a country that exports 90% of our food, most of that to the European Union. That common market is massively important to us, and therefore obviously we have to work off those common standards as well, and adhere to those and negotiate those. So the objective now for the next 2 years in relation to the derogation in particular will be to work collaboratively together to make sure we do continue with the work, that we'll see progress in relation to water quality, and that we re-secure that derogation post-2025.
We have another question, Niamh.
Hi, Minister. Fergal Morris from MSD Animal Health. We know that disease results in 20% increase in greenhouse gas emissions. And in Ireland, for example, in cattle, there's only 25% of cattle that vaccinate, or 25% of cattle are vaccinated to prevent diarrhoea and respiratory disease. That's closer to 100% in the pig or poultry industry. With that in mind, can you share some thoughts on how we can increase the adoption of vaccines to prevent disease, but also monitoring technology to improve productivity?
Thanks, Fergal, and I think you're absolutely right. The importance of animal health in relation to profitability and productivity, as well as making sure that we're making the most of the resources inputs we put in and minimising our emissions is really, really crucial. I think from a department point of view, that's something we've put a focus on, and I think the work that Animal Health Ireland does as well, in terms of bringing all stakeholders together to look at the different disease challenges we have and to try and improve the use of vaccination while reducing the use of antibiotics and treatments in the process. And from my point of view, in relation to the schemes we're putting in and some of the assistance we're providing, for example, in relation to the new suckler supports that have introduced this year for the new suckler scheme, which is looking to get a benchmark in relation to IBR in the beef herd across the country, and then to look to see how we can actually work with Animal Health Ireland to address that. That is one example. And also then information exchange, knowledge transfer in relation to the benefits of preventing rather than treatment, and continuing to back all of our research organisations who are doing really strong work on this as well, to continue to improve upon that is going to be really important, and it's something that's a key pillar of our Food Vision 2030 strategy as well.
My clock has gone red. I have time for one more quick question. I think we have somebody else.
Neil Keane, Alltech. Thanks, Minister. How do you believe science can influence policy development now and into the future, with the two goals of achieving significant climate mitigation outcomes, but also providing meaningful income supports for farmers?
I think it's absolutely critical to making progress. I mean, that challenge in relation to increasing and maintaining and increasing our food production while reducing emissions and providing space in terms of how we steward our landscape for nature around us, that's a really difficult challenge. I believe that science is going to be absolutely central and compulsory in relation to actually meeting that challenge. And we're already seeing, in relation to lots of the research that's happening across the country, the potential in relation to actually delivering on that. The recent announcement I made a couple of months ago, working with all stakeholders in the beef sector, for example, and the dairy sector, to be the first country in the world to genotype our herd, is a really strong example of where science, data and technology, and applying that can make a real difference and a real impact in relation to improving productivity, reducing emissions, and really importantly, improving profitability. So I see it as central and core to that challenge, and that's why all of you in this room here are so important to that. That's why, as a government, we're investing so much in relation to research, and will continue to do so. And that's why also it's going to be so important that we put a focus in relation to making sure that the new learnings, the new technology, the new science that's being developed and verified, that we continue to put a real focus in relation to translating that into actually application and applying it at farm level. And what we're seeing happening within the farm gates and within food businesses across the country is remarkable. The progress and work that is ongoing is truly inspiring, and I think we're in a very strong place to have a really strong future ahead of us in relation to the ag-food sector. Our starting point in an era where climate and sustainability are to the foremost in relation to the issues that are important in the world is a really strong one, because the agricultural system that we have here is world leading. But we have to continue to improve in every way possible, continue to get better in order to hold our leadership position in that, and make sure that we maximise the value of it as well in terms of the economic well-being of the industry and of farm families. Science and technology and applying it is going to be absolutely critical and paramount to that.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll bring the questions to an end. In a moment, I'll ask you to thank the Minister for his contribution, and then I will finally wrap up the session. But Minister, thank you very much.